lesson a lot about building a data evaluation system in your MTSS. We wanted to share a resource and use for you today of an example of an LEA in North Carolina who's really worked to build a concrete data evaluation system, at least in the area of literacy in the elementary grades. This example actually comes from an LEA I worked in before being a consultant on the state team. And really it came around this problem of we wanted to have a cohesive and meaningful way to use our literacy screening information to drive core instruction. So many of you also have a universal screening data and you use that to plan and drive core instruction. But we were really struggling with how to make that concrete and usable at the school level. And one of the things we were struggling with was we wanted to set goals so we could monitor core instruction, the progress of core instruction, and analyze how we were doing along the way. But we really struggled with the method. We had lots of different schools. So the idea of the 80% heuristic really was a burden for us. For example, we may have a school who their third grade students, they may start of 80% of the students meeting that benchmark. So what type of goal would they set? 85%, 90%? What would be meaningful? And then on the other hand, there might be a school right down the road whose third grade students maybe started the year at 50% of the students meeting benchmark. So it didn't seem reasonable to set that same goal of 80% for that group of students. So we really just struggled with how do we set meaningful goals that'll get us to eventually this idea and concept of core instruction alone, meeting the needs of 80% of our students. Another place we struggled with that was in schools where we may be approaching 80%, but that wasn't the case for all of the subgroups. So we may have groups of students who had high levels of need, but those weren't showing up when we just set a goal of overall of 80% of our students would meet that benchmark level. So the process for how we had a solution for that, there's sort of a format solution and a process solution. The format solution came where we really adjusted existing meetings to begin to shift those to a data analysis or work session meetings. So we had on the calendar already monthly or every other month principal meetings for elementary principals. And what happened is the focus of those meetings shifted from sort of information, receiving of information from principals to more of a work session and preparing principals to be instructional leaders. So those meetings were principals came and then they added essential members of their school leadership team. So they would actually leave their buildings and all come together. And those work sessions began to line up, or those meetings lined up with the close of the benchmark window for the M-Class administration. So when we think about our data evaluation plan or that calendar, that became an activity that would happen 3 times a year right after we finished collecting that data so we could be responsive and analyze in a timely fashion. So the big format shift was a shift in focus from those meetings. So the focus from just receiving information instead of doing that, really preparing principals to be instructional leaders, aligning and making sure those dates and that calendar lined up so that we could be timely in our response to collecting that data. And then the third thing was really adjusting our behavior and modeling. Instead of talking about MTSS or talking about problem solving or talking about core instruction, the behavior change was that we actually did those things during these work sessions. So instead of talking about the ideas of what we wanted to do, we modeled, here's how it looks to problem solve through core instruction data. Now we're going to do it together, and that's going to become a regular occurrence. So this was the format of those meetings happened multiple times a year. It really became, our data evaluation plan became live during that. The process of those meetings we had to do a lot of work ahead of time to equip our principals and school leadership to be ready to come to work with us. So what we did was we asked them to bring a certain set of items. We would send that to them ahead of time, and we just set those really strong behavioral expectations. And our principals and leadership teams, they rose to the challenge, and so they came equipped so we could spend all of our time working during those work sessions. The process of the meetings became very helpful and useful when we really just stumbled on a tool that provided us the answers to the questions that we'd had for years. And that question is, if I have a group of students at my school, my second grade group of students starts the year at 50% of them meeting the benchmark, what really is a SMART goal, what really is an attainable goal, a reasonable goal for that group of students, and how can we know that we're setting well-informed goals. So we stumbled on a tool from Amplify that provides the normative data and growth information around all the districts using DIPLS or MClass in the nation. So what it does is it basically takes your school and your grade level and it places you in a cohort of schools or grade levels who start where you start. And then it measures your growth compared to all those other those folks in the cohort. So if my students start at 50% of them meeting that benchmark, then how did other schools and other grade levels who started where I started, how did they do throughout the course of the year? So it really gives some robustness to that goal setting. So there are two ways to use this tool. I'm going to just kind of show you the tool itself, and then show you how I think it can become even more robust as an actual planning and useful tool in an MTSS process. So I'm going to show you a couple things here. So what you see on this part of the screen is part of a report that you're very familiar with. So this is a comparing populations report. This is a DIPLS report. You can see it's for a whole school. The whole school level. It's specifically for a third grade is the grade level we're going to look at. You can see I generated certain times of the year, and that this is the composite score. So this is looking at the overall score and health of reading. The times of year that I generated this report for were the beginning of year for the 14-15 school year and end of year for that school year. So we're going to take a look at that in sort of a historical look. And then we're going to see how powerful this tool can be for planning ahead and setting goals by generating the beginning of year for whatever would be the current school year. So if we were back in time in October, then this would be the beginning of this past school year. So I'm going to shift this over so we can see both things at once here. And this is the actual tool that has been provided by Amplify, and you'll have access to this tool. And just so you know, when you open it up, there's some really nice directions and explanation around the tool on this first sheet. So it just lets you know that this is a progress planning tool. It utilizes that national information from MClass and gives you the same thing that we just talked about, that it compares your growth to schools that begin the year with a similar percentage of students reading at the benchmark level. So it's always looking at students at the benchmark level. The benefit of this tool is to provide you some context for your school's performance compared to folks that started like you. And then it gives you specific directions down here on how to use the tool. So I'm going to model that for you right now. So what it lets us do here is take a look at the percentage of students that scored at benchmark for the beginning of the year. So this bar right here that we can see on this screen, so that beginning percentage for those third graders was 60%. So that would go in this box. And then the next step, it says also then the end of year administration during that 14-15 school year. So that was this second bar right here. So that was that 67%. So I'm going to type that in. And before I click to show you this level of progress that it's going to show us, I want you to think about if you had a group of third graders, and your third graders started the year with 60% of those students meeting benchmark, and that grew to 67% of students meeting benchmark at the end of the year. Do you think that is meaningful growth? So just have that conversation with your team members here for just a second. You can pause and have that conversation. And the power of this tool is we don't have to rely on whether or not we think that's meaningful growth. We're actually going to know that compared to other places where students started the year at 60% of students at the benchmark and ended the year with 67% of the students at benchmark, that would be above average progress compared to those other schools. So what I didn't tell you about the tool is it gives five levels. So it'll tell like average progress. So did the kind of that typical progress. Were you above average, well above average, or below average, or well below average compared to the places that started like you? So that's a nice reflection. Typically, when we sort of got into the flow of these work sessions, this is what we would do at the end of each year, is to reflect on our practice for the year and say, okay, so in third grade, we moved from 60 to 67%. That's above average progress. We could stop there, but what we've done is add a sheet here for you. It's the Historical Progress Protocol tab. And what it does is it'll feed in directly from that front sheet of that 60 to 67% that you put in, that level of progress. But then it's going to give you a space to kind of answer some questions based on this growth. I want you to note trends and observations to share back with the grade level, so that communication loop. And then specifically, what does this growth tell you about the effectiveness of core instruction? So here for third grade, we might say that during the 14-15 school year, we did a lot of adjustment to core instruction in third grade. We focused more resources there. We added personnel. We set a 90-minute uninterrupted literacy block for that specific grade level, and really focused on not only some sub-skill work, so some advanced phonics and teaching vocabulary through morphology, but we also worked on higher level reading comprehension skills. So we expected a lot of growth, and we're pleased that we have that above average progress. Just for fun, let's take a look and see what if in kindergarten, what if that group of students happened to start at 60% of those students came in at benchmark, and at the end of the year, that same number, let's say 67% of the students ended the year at benchmark in kindergarten. I want you to have that same conversation. Do you think that's good growth? Would that be meaningful growth? We see that here it was enough to be above average compared to other schools that started the same place that this school started. So in kindergarten, would those results be the same? And so the answer here is that happens to be below average progress. So in kindergarten, students typically, the groups of students that start at 60% of those students at benchmark would make much more progress than was shown here. So if we had to answer the same question about the effectiveness of core instruction for a group of kindergarten students on using this tool, we would have to say that our core instruction was not effective, and we would have the chance then to maybe dig in and look at the specific measures to see, were there specific areas of weakness? Was it phonemic awareness? Was it basic phonics instruction? When we think about our full MTSS, that would give us the chance to say, maybe we need to look at our attendance data and ensure that students were there to receive the instruction. Did we have the right number of adults assisting with instruction? That would give us the chance to really reflect on all the different components of instruction. So you can see that we use the tool in that historical way, or that evaluative way at the end of the year, to reflect on progress. But the power of the tool also works in sort of setting goals and having a way to monitor the progress of core instruction through the school year. So let's quickly just kind of shift our thinking to that. And you'll see as we work through this goal setting that we're really sort of modeling the problem solving process as we go through this. So this fourth sheet, the planning protocol, is a template that you can certainly use that would assist with this. So there are a few directions up here that how to use the progress planning tool in this way for goal setting in core instruction and progress monitoring of core instruction. So the first thing we're going to do is record a baseline for each grade level. So we're going to use this third grade example here. And again, you can see, so if we were thinking about this at the beginning of the 15-16 school year, the percentage of students who were meeting the benchmark with that cohort of third graders, 68% of the students. So that's what we would put here in our third grade block. We would actually facilitate these conversations with principals and leadership teams, kind of walk them through block by block. So what we want to do is think, like, what do we want to see at the end of the school year, and then kind of backtrack that at the middle of the school year for this group of third graders. If they start with 68% of the students at benchmark at the beginning of the year, what do we want to see by the end of the year? And instead of having schools kind of set goals with just the percent of students at benchmark, we really challenged them to think about your plans for core instruction in third grade. And what type of progress do you expect from that? So if you're getting ready to put all your resources in third grade, if you're going to have an uninterrupted literacy block, if you're going to put teacher assistants, and if you're going to spend tutor money and put those adults in the classroom and really put your resources there, then you really should expect that progress range to be that well above average progress, right? You're putting all your resources there, your eggs in that basket. That's what you should expect. So that's the conversation that is fruitful and meaningful to have around setting those goals. So how would you do that? That's by using this second tab, this progress ranges. This is my favorite tab. Those of you who know me won't be surprised at all. So this tab is where all of the information lives that fed that first tab. So that first tab sort of calculates the information for you, but it's all found here on the second tab. So this lets us know the steps to sort of do this if you just did it paper and pencil. So to evaluate the progress, we're actually going to adjust this a little bit because we're going to use it to set some goals. So the first thing to do is select the correct grade level or range of grades from the drop-down menu. So you can see here I've selected third grade, but I could select kindergarten all the way through fifth grade, or if I wanted to do this for ranges of grades, it's available that way as well. And then the second set of directions tells me to find the row in the first column that corresponds to the percent of students scoring at benchmark. So in my case, we're looking at that 68% of students scoring at benchmark. So I'm going to find this row, and I'll highlight it so I can make sure I'm still in the right row when I record my results of, at the beginning of the year, I'm looking at that cohort of students who started at between 60 and 70% of their students started at benchmark. So those are the schools that start like I start. And then what we decided is we're going to put a lot of resources in our core instruction. So I should not expect well below average progress. I should not expect below average progress or even average progress. I should be expecting to see these students achieve well above average progress because we're putting the time and the energy and effort into this core instruction. So when I choose a percentage of students who will likely meet the benchmark at the middle of the year, that I'm going to choose from this block right here. So I'm going to go ahead and, for the sake of our time today, I'm going to choose 75%. And so on my planning protocol, I can move right over here and say 75% of the students are going to meet benchmark at the middle of the year. That's my goal. But I've set that based on the well above average progress. And there's no reason to think that that wouldn't happen for the end of the year, so well above average progress. And the percent at benchmark there. So if we look at these progress ranges, this was my middle of the year. You can see end of the year, so I'm going to look all the way across and see that if I start at 68% of students at benchmark and I look all the way to the end of the year, well above average progress would have me choosing between 77 and 100% of the students that would meet benchmark in that end of the year. So I'm going to go ahead and just circle back around and complete this and set a goal of 80%. So this is where an 80% goal would actually work out. But I have a lot of faith in that goal because I know that other schools who started like I started, but who did the best of all the schools who started like I started, were able to do that. So that lets us know that it really is a realistic goal to set. And just setting those goals obviously is not going to increase my student achievement. So I have a third step here where we actually would sit with principals and we would begin to record our strategies for meeting these goals. So what are our plans to meet these goals? These are attainable goals, but they are quite aggressive. So we would want to record things here in this box like we're going to have a 90-minute uninterrupted literacy block. There are going to be 2 to 3 adults during that literacy block actually instructing. We might want to include things about not just teacher on-task time, but student on-task time. So students will be with an instructor 95% of the instructional block. What would the instruction look like? Maybe we want to spend 20 minutes a day on vocabulary instruction, and that would be us maybe using a blend of teaching morphology and also maybe using other strategies like maybe a Freyer model to teach vocabulary that's going to come straight from our content. We also might want to include in there other things that wouldn't go on during the small group instruction. And what does whole group instruction look like? We're going to embed our literacy instruction through science and social studies. So we're going to bring that to life for our students. So whatever our strategies are, that is the core instruction that will take place, you can record here. That's the hardest part, is to actually put that on paper. But you see so far, we've sort of identified our problem. We've done some analysis, set some goals, some hypotheses. We now have a plan that's ready to implement. And then when we revisit that at the middle of the year, we actually can say, have we done what we said we were going to do with the plan? And then were we able to meet that midterm goal? So monitor the progress of core instruction. And then again, in the middle of the year, we can make any adjustments we need. Maybe we need more adults to help with that instruction, or maybe we need more time, or any way that we can move our resources around. And then I'll come back and revisit that at the end of the year to celebrate the progress and all the work that we've done in core instruction. And just to wrap it up, in this particular district, in this particular LEA, that method of the process of this coming prepared to work sessions, being focused on instruction fully for about 3 hours during that work session, and really bringing to life, like making it concrete, this idea of the problem-solving model. This has been going on for 3 or 4 years, and now it's something that principals, they ask for it. They demand to kind of have this protected time to actually engage in the problem-solving process, but in a real way that's meaningful for planning instruction. So I hope you'll use this tool, and it will also benefit your data evaluation system in an MTSS.